Yo, it's Guido coming at you with a Tactics Talk and a review of the brand new Tier 8 German Premium Heavy Tank. Because we needed another Premium Heavy Tank, right, folks? Hey, look, content is king. The more, the merrier. This one's been floating around a bit, I think. They finally released it. There's a couple interesting things about it. We'll go over it as we talk. I'm going to bring the one thing that I found very interesting up right at the beginning, and I generally don't talk about prices. Everything's to taste, whether someone wants to afford it or not, or can. That's really up to you, and there's lots of different ways to do this. But the 7501K is quite cheap, actually, and I showed it on my Coffee Talk. If you add a coupon to it, it gets down to something like $30 or slightly less than $30, which is very, very cheap for a Tier 8. And my question at that point becomes, all right, why? Was it just a one-time good deal? Are we talking a new pricing convention for Pixel tanks? Is this a acknowledgement that it's not that great of a tank? Well, let's talk about it as we go, because to be honest, I'm not quite sure. I really don't think it's a new pricing convention. Otherwise, you would see, I think, a lot of tanks being reduced in price, and I just don't see that. Maybe if it's a new pricing convention from the beginning or from here on, I don't know. That remains to be seen. But I just thought that was a small, interesting side note. But here it is. A rear-mounted German heavy tank with some pretty good frontal armor. You might recognize it as very similar to the ISM, which is a Tech Tree tank, or to the Chrysler K, which is an American premium tank. The same kind of idea. Lots of armor on the front, not much on the side. Big flat billboard side, as you can see right there. So we'll go over an overview. We'll go over the Tech Tree considerations. We'll talk about the armor. The 3D model is not currently up in tanks.gg. We'll do a comparison amongst its peers, look at my stats after 20 battles, my setup, and I'll give you some examples of gameplay of the VK7501K. So overview-wise, take a look at what Wargaming says about this. A concept of the development of heavy tanks with rear turret placement. No prototypes were built, never saw mass production. So again, another kind of paper napkin tank. This doesn't even say blueprint, so concept. No idea if it even got to the blueprint stage, but it very clearly looks like a German tank, obviously. I think the 3D model on this one is very nice. See the helmet's sitting there, the nice the cloth thing on the gun mantlet, the cover, cloth cover, the equipment on the side. I mean, just look at it. It's really pretty dang cool. What does that say right there? Just notice that. 200 liters of something. That's probably oil or fuel or something of that nature, but I like the model. Nicely done on the model. You can see rear turreted, which I've mentioned a couple times. That's going to make it a bit ungainly in some situations. For people who like side scraping, it's a competent side scraper. Realize it's Tier 8, so when it sees 9s and 10s, they don't really care about your side scraping too much. Not too much. And the front armor is interesting. We'll get to that in just a minute. Very large tank. You can see that the Löwe is about the same size, a 100, even not too much smaller than the 100. In fact, just front to back, it's similar sizing. Marbrecher is absolutely massive. T-34B, KV-5 in comparison to this bad boy. You can see it's on the large side, but not the largest of the Tier 8. So you're not hiding very well in this thing, and its camo is terrible. I'm always surprised at how small the Russian tanks in relative comparison are when you get into the IS and the Defender and things like that. WZ as well. Prototypes a bit smaller. The mills are tiny. Tall but tiny. Suma kind of are roughly the same size. So you get the picture here. It's a fairly large Tier 8, slow, relatively ungainly heavy tank with good armor in the front. Is really the bottom line for the review. Let's look at the Tech Tree considerations for this thing, which mostly is in regards to the crew. Crew trainer is really what you're probably buying this thing for. So I've got a couple of the selected heavy tanks. Here's the kind of interesting thing about the German Tech Tree lines. There are not very many tanks post-war, like the Leopard is one of them. The Leopard PTA, the Indian, some other things like that. But the heavy tanks are pretty much all World War II developments or planned developments towards the end of World War II. That means a lot of them have radio operators still, which is pretty interesting. You'll see that the 7501, commander, gunner, driver, radio operator, loader. Well, guess what? Your Tiger II, no problem, trains it nicely. Your 4502 Alpha, no problem, trains it nicely. Panzer 7, yep, good to go. To heavy tank, Maus, you're going to have to find a loader somewhere amongst all those things as you move up. And it may be, did the Mauschen get to Let's look at that real quick. The Malshin may actually have had two. There you go. So your Malshin is going to do that. When you're using those crews in your 7501, your one loader is not getting his training. But otherwise, it's a pretty darn good matchup. And for the tanks that only have 4, if there are any heavies, I didn't find any. I suppose there may be. But if there are, then obviously it's usually the radio operator that falls out, and he just won't get trained. So as a trainer for your German tanks in the tech tree, pretty good. Currently, it is not in the tech tree for sale, so you won't be able to buy that thing other than in the shop at this point. Let's move on to the armor. I'd love to show you tanks.gg and give you a better idea of the dynamic as you angle it and things, but let's look at the armor just because tanks.gg is not showing it right now. 180 on the front, 100 on the sides, which should make it a decent side scraper. It's okay at that. 80 on the back, which is actually fairly significant. 250 on the turret, 100 on the sides of the turret. But let's talk about that. There's the 250, this great big thick mantlet piece right here, this front armor piece. Angled, as far as curved anyway, but when you flat plate it right there, just about anything pushing 2 at tier 8, and certainly TDs, and just about anything at tier 9 and 10 is going to have not too much trouble buttering this turret. It is a fairly small piece of turret, I guess, piece of metal to shoot. The thing is, when you start to side scrape, you get some kind of weird things going on. If you keep your turret straight forward, you actually have a little bit less angle on the side. See that kind of strange how it's angled right there. It is very difficult, unlike the Maus that has that big square turret where it's fairly easy to kind of angle it and get people to bounce. Because of this curved nature, it's very tricky. And so a little bit of forward and back rocking just to spoil aim is a good idea with this thing when side scraping. Clearly, one of the big deals is this giant weak spot up here, this huge turret, or not turret, but this huge cupola up on top, and that is certainly penetrable. I did have trouble with that. Side scraping out this way is nice because it does protect that, but side scraping out this way, not as nice because that thing is now exposed. Then you're looking at the 180 on the front hull armor. I can't remember what the bottom plate is. It's a little bit less. Note that it's angled, but not great. Whereas if you get to the Chrysler K, look at the ISM, a little bit more angled, slightly smaller lower plate right there. And then I'm trying to find the Chrysler K. Where is that bad boy? Any moment. There we go. And the Chrysler K, you can see a little bit more angled on the top and big flat plate on the bottom as well. But the thing about the Chrysler K is it's got that fantastic turret. We'll talk about that in just a minute. So decent side scraper, not amazing. Weak spot on the top, lower plate, pretty darn weak. Can be pinned by just about any tier 8 that's serious about it. So putting a little angle helps. And big tracks for eating HE and heat will help that as well. All right, let's move on to the comparison. As always, I have this set up with 100% crews, no kind of equipment or skills or perks. So all you're seeing is the basic tank. These are all premiums. So I've gone ahead and just compared it to premiums out there. 490, it's got the biggest stick at tier 8 in heavy tanks. That 490 Alpha is pretty nice. Unfortunately, that comes at a price of 1,723 DPM. If you've watched any of my reviews, this game is not purely about DPM. And if you pay attention to these premium tanks, it's really not that far off of any of them. Chrysler K is probably what, at the top or so. Obviously, it's the T26 E5. Most of these are your heavily armored, frontal heavily armored premium tanks, which is what this thing is more or less the role that it's going to play most of the time. T26, I just threw that in there. It's not as heavily armored in the front, and it's got the smaller gun. You can note that a lot of these are running a 440, or at least 3 of these are running two of them, sorry, are running a 440. The rest are about 300 to 320. And of course, you got the little pew-pew gun on the T26 E5 for comparison. And the trade-off there is you've got a low alpha, but you've got a higher DPM. As a general rule, not always, but as a general rule, that is how Wargaming does some of their balance. The pen is relatively low at 226, and I say that, and then you look at the rest of them and say, well, geez, the PR is 218, the Chrysler's at 198. Remember, the knock on that was you had to use gold. Well, not so much on this one. 226 is kind of mediocre for a tier 8 heavy, but it's not terrible. Not terrible. And if you dab 2, you're in the 250s or so. Rate of fire is very slow. You've got a reload of 17 seconds base right there. That does limit your capability in brawling a little bit. You've got to be very careful. If you get into a face hug or some kind of circling situation with a smaller, faster firing tank, you can often find yourself in big trouble. And while you hit for 490, if you miss or bounce, that hurts a lot. So you really want to, if you're going to do the brawling thing you want a little bit of standoff and some cover so you can get back to it and then come out with your great side scraping profile generally anyway, and try to drop that 490 on those guys, and then get back into covers. Kind of a general gameplay idea. Traverse on the gun is very slow. Most of the German tanks tend to be very slow like this, especially the heavy tanks. This hurts. -5 is not so good. Rear mounted or rear turreted tanks tend to have that. You see the Chrysler K is at -6, so obviously he's dealing with a very similar thing. I will show you that on the replays, a bit of the issue with that. There's a lot of places in this game where you need about -8 to really make them work. Nice places to get to, and -5 you've got to do kind of a lot of dancing around to get your gun on people, and that can cost you time and hits. Aiming time is okay at 259. Not as good as the Mutant or the T26E5, but not nearly as bad as things like the 252U. So that was one of the trade-offs with that big 440 gun. This was one of the first Tier 8 mediums to get a higher alpha at 440, but it's got this terrible aiming time. Not so much with the VK7501, but it is a little derpy. Again, not as bad as the 252U, but .37 is pretty far up there, not as comfortable as you would like. You see the low down at .32, and a lower DPM, but a better base pen. Again, not by much, and only 320 on the alpha. So it is an interesting trade-off, and you can kind of see the development of their balance as you go through these, with the low being a much older tank and the 7501 coming out now. Now, do those numbers speak to the low price? I'll just mention again, I don't know. I don't know if they looked at this and went, hey, let's just sell this at a low price and make everyone happy, or hey, it's not really a great Tier 8 in its configuration, so we'll sell it at what we think it's worth. It's a good question for a dev or for the marketing guys, or both, depending on how they did that. Hit points at 1600 is decent, slightly less than the low, higher than a lot of those guys there. Another 100 to 50 hit points over most of them. There's the armor I talked about. There's the turret at 250 and 100 on the sides. I found the turret to be less useful than, say, an Object 252 at 250 or a Chrysler K at 254, because the angles just really don't work that well. Plus, you've got that giant tumor on top, and that's something the Chrysler K doesn't really have, right? So he's got that rounded turret. The 252 has a angled turret, but he's got hatches, but they're hard to get to. This hatch is just really not that hard to get to. Pretty heavy at 75. Interestingly, not as heavy as the Lurva. Kind of strange. And the Lurva is a little faster, so this dude is slow. When you feel that the low is sprightly, then you know you've got a slow tank. And traverse speed low. Again, that is one of the things about German heavy tanks. They tend to have bad hull traverse and bad turret traverse. Get down to concealment. That's hard to see there, but there isn't any, essentially. 4%, 2% while moving or firing. Or, sorry, 2% while moving, 0.32 while moving and firing. So essentially no camo with this thing. Spotting range is decent at 380. It surprises me a little sometimes. I always forget that the Tier 8 heavies have comparable view range, most of them, to the Tier 8 scouts, to be quite honest, which is interesting. But once you get to the Tier 8 to 10 regime in this game, you start to get what I call vision saturation. Most everything has very good vision, and it really constricts the game. However, if you're running around in this thing against Tier 6s, you've got a great advantage through everything that it's got as far as how hard it hits, its armor, vision, all of those things. All right, that's comparison. What would I say overall? Kind of interesting. It's right in the middle, I'd say. This is definitely not the next OP flavor of the month, but it isn't terrible. And the 490 Alpha is interesting. You know, you hit for 560 with a Tier 8 heavy. That's kind of an interesting thing, and it does give you some options on killing near deads that you wouldn't have with, say, the T26E5. Right? T26E5 gets a guy at 500 hit points. He's definitely taken 2 shots. You get a guy at 500 hit points with the 7501, you might delete him with 1 shot. Slightly high roll, and that's a pretty good thing for a Tier 8 heavy, because you really are looking to remove tanks with these things. These guys are your combat dudes. You want to do as much damage with these things as possible. But it's slow, it's ungainly, it's a rear turreted tank. So if you are a mobile guy, you like the vision game, you like the bush kind of game, this is probably not your tank. If you're a slower type plotting player, you like to side scrape, you like to get into strong positions and brawl, this is right up your alley. All right, let's move on to the stats. How did I do? I did pretty good with this tank, actually. Low sample size, so keep that in mind. But 20 battles is good enough to get a kind of feel for this thing. 65% win rate and 1,000 average XP. So what is this solo for me? This is probably a 58% or so, maybe 60%. I'm overperforming a little bit in win rate, so that'll be a bit of that RNG and luck stuff going on. Hits at 78. That speaks to being very careful with that large gun and making sure that the shots count. You'll see a couple times in my replays I don't do that, so really I'd like to see that higher, especially with a gun that really needs to hit. Obviously every gun needs to hit, but this one, because of its long reload, you really need to make the shots effective on this, so I'd really like to see that closer to 80 or higher. Damage ratio is decent at 1.4, destruction at 2.17. All right, armor 0.66, that's decent situational armor. Anything down near 0 is 0 armor. Anything around 0.5 is situational and a bit tier related. At 1.0 or anything around 1.0, that's a really nicely heavily armored tank. So you can see this one has got a good profile from the front, but it does have a lot of weaknesses, and it sees tier 9s and 10s where the armor doesn't matter as much. So a decent result, but don't expect this to be the next Mouse. All right, it's not. Experience is good, I mentioned that. 1800 is a little low. So that's lower than a 65% win rate would indicate. That's why I mentioned it earlier on. This is probably more of a 55 to 58% type of DPG. 1200 received, 358 on the assist. Spotted low, as you would expect for a slow heavy. And vehicles destroyed 1.3 for each battle, and that's a little bit low as well. So overperforming in win rate for the numbers that I got. But it was a comfortable tank. I didn't have too much trouble winning with it. Especially high or top tier, it can be very devastating. So that's how I did in it. Let's look at my... There's no real surprises here. I had an okay crew. This is my 4502 Alpha crew. They have 1 skill and 75% on the second. So a better crew obviously would help these numbers out a bit. All top modules because it's a premium. That's all you've got. So we're running a vert stab. It does have vert stab. That's nice. Gun rammer and improved vents. I don't know if anyone else would really recommend anything other than that on this tank. That's usually I kind of go through some other options. I really don't think there are any other options. Those are the 3 you want on this thing. 26 AP, only ran 6 APCR. The APCR pen is 263 average. So I said 250, I think. It's actually a little better than that. And that's pretty good, actually. Pretty good. I ran large kits. I ran a large fire extinguisher. I've been running a lot of food lately, but this is a German tank, and they tend to burn. So I went with the large fire extinguisher, and then I would put whatever directive I had. Often it was the orderly ammo rack, which I think brings it down. What is my reload time right now? It's at 15:02. And if I put an orderly ammo rack on this thing, I can drop it to 14.6, which is getting okay. still long, still kind of painful, but better. So I recommend using something like vents or orderly ammo rack or one of the aiming directives if you've got them. You might as well use them if you've got them. And that is my setup. So let's look at some examples of gameplay. All right, for my first example of gameplay, it's going to be a tier 10 battle. So showing you a little bit of bottom tier, where I'm going to have kind of a mediocre game, but it'll show you some of the strengths and weaknesses of the 7501. We're here on mines spawned into the south, and I'm going to go up to the middle. There is one artillery, but it's a 55-55 or a 155-55, and they don't hit too hard. So I'm looking at being able to counter push the hill, and the good news is we actually stopped them from taking the hill. So now I'm just looking for an opportunity to get up there, and this is actually kind of interesting what happens here because we've got plenty of tanks, and all we got to do is push up, but nobody wants to do it. And the Krons get them all firing, and I thought the mutant was going to go, not the super, but the M6 mutant thing here. And all of a sudden these guys are going back and forth, and I'm thinking, just go up the hill. I'm just trying, like, fellas, come on. We can make this happen. There we go. They don't have anything here, right? They just have the Suma. That guy just died. And then we've got the T-49 coming. He takes a chunk or takes a shot, and I actually get up there unscathed. So a little bit of pushing and shoving to get these guys going. The 110E3 is there. Good on him. You got to love it when a big gunned TD gets up forward and helps to stop guys from coming up the hill. That was really nicely done on his part. So we get the hill, but this is not really the greatest tank up here. Why? Because its depression is absolutely atrocious, and that's why I wanted to show you this right here. You'll see that there's a big issue here on even just this spot, which is really known to be a great spot. I can't even quite get the gun on it. A lot of that's just unfamiliarity with the tank. So I'm looking for an opportunity here, and I think I'm actually going to get punched right in the face because I'm spotted. Might not be here, but it is going to be soon. I've got all my hit points right now, but I pretty soon will not, as I'm messing around. Their artillery probably sees me or has a shot, and I notice I just can't quite get the gun down on those guys. And it is a JPZ, so I'm going to eat a shot here from him. Boom. So he drops 1,041 on me, but I actually find a way to get into him. I'm not really sure if I got the superstructure or snuck one into that weak spot little hatch on the top, or actually got down into his lower plate, but I was able to pin through. Now the pin's not amazing. We've already talked about that. It's down here at it's not quite low strength actually. What we got here? As soon as I get my mouse doing its thing. 226. I mean, it's okay, but not amazing. And the gold is running at about 250 something, 263, which is actually pretty good for APCR. Now I'm using a little bit of this ridge right here to try to get some shots on these guys. The Conqueror is hidden, so I'm going to try to sneak one. Actually, he just gives me that front sprocket, which is really nice, and somehow doesn't track him, or he fixed it that fast. So I've got to get out of there. There's one more hit from that JPZ, and it's pretty much all over. Now we're winning handily, so I'm just looking for damage here if I can get it. So we'll come around here. There we go. Looking for the T69. And look, I can't even get the gun down. See that? I have to actually shift. And now when I use this little hill, I'm going to come up above these bushes a little bit. And I make a bit of a comeback. They drop 3 of us really quickly right there. Unfortunately, a little low on my aim. I think had I aimed a little higher to the superstructure, that would have worked out a lot nicer. Since there's nobody poking or pointing at me, not poking at me either, really, I'm able to just kind of sit here and wait for maybe another shot in the JPZ. You'll notice it's quite a long reload. And all of a sudden, he's looking like he wants to come after me. So I will bounce off of him again. And we've got a T69 down there at JPZ, and the Conqueror is still running around. I don't want to really come out. If somebody can get him to fire, I think pretty soon the 5100 gets up in there. 268 is backed by the cap along with the Scorpion G. So I'll just leave these guys to their own devices. Got spotted doing it, that's fine. I'm going to turtle up for just a second so I don't take any hits from the 155. Which I probably shouldn't have worried about, because look how he's stuffed back behind that rock. If he comes around the corner, he's done. So that's good. Now we're going to fight the depression again. See how this goes uphill a little bit, so I can't come too far forward. That's a good thing, though, because what I don't want to do is get into the edge of those bushes and get seen. So we'll shoot this great big massive gun from more than 15 meters behind these bushes. Nice long reload, so we're just looking for another opportunity. I'm trying to go after that lower plate down there if I can get it. He goes dark. I just accept the shot. That one actually went in. So I'll get a little more damage at the end of this than what's showing. There he is. So damaged again. He's at 600. And he gets nuked. And then something glorious happens. We find the artillery. I'm reloaded. And RNG works for me. I don't even have to zoom all the way in. Conqueror's getting jumped on over there. And I'll come off this. One thing about these big heavy tanks that are so slow, it's just part of the game. If you're careful, you can go off the soap rocks like that, as long as you don't hit straight down onto your hole. If you can get yourself down onto the tracks, I'll rush this shot a little bit and miss. If I'd have waited, I'd have had it. See how he actually turned right there? So there was another 400 plus damage that I could have had. But as it is, I'm over about 2,000 in a tier 10 battle, so not bad at all, and ends up being a win. But again, shows you some of the weaknesses of the tank with the gun depression and the slowness of it overall right there. And of course, the fact that when you face tier 10s, the armor on it is probably not going to do much. Now, where did he hit? Did he actually get into my turret? Look at that. He went right through the front armor on the corner. Ostensibly some of the thickest armor right there where those two plates come together, isn't it? Holy cow. Right through there. All right, let's move on to the second example. For the second example, we're going to switch gears. I'm going to show you the top tier replay. And you look at this setup and go, holy cow, I can absolutely bully these guys. The one thing I want to avoid is 2 major things. Number 1, getting crushed by artillery, so too much focus getting out in the open for artillery. Or number 2, getting surrounded by many smaller tanks where this thing's mobility and lack of sight and rear armor is going to hurt it. So, unfortunately, I do a little bit of that, because as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, man, I have this. There is nothing really here that can challenge me. so I'm just going to bully. But unfortunately, I'm more or less alone. Now this is an interesting spot right here. What I really don't want to do is get into a sniper game with the Tiger II and a Pershing. The good news is the Pershing is across the road. He's over in those, there's kind of a blockade or a roadblock right there. But the Tiger II's on the corner, and I see him moving up. So I need to get up here and get behind this cover before he can start taking sniper shots. And I'm going to take the opportunity right now, because I know the Pershing doesn't know I'm here, to come around the corner and just put a great big old hit on him. So I'm going to nicely zoom in and then shoot right into the ground. Goes right into the ground, and the Tiger's looking at me. He's thinking about it, giving him a little angle, and he's going to just butter me right here. Don't hit me. Oh, okay, never mind. I forgot. He actually bounced the first shot. So now I'm thinking about, I'm just going to back out because I have no support. Takes another shot. Looks like he shoots over towards my TD that's in the back, so I'm going to go ahead and cover up right here. Good news for me on this side scrape is my hatch is on the left side, so I'm not exposing the hatch when I come around. And all of a sudden now I've got a KV2, and there's the derpiness of that gun. It will let you down on occasion right there. Coming back this way, thinking that for a moment I might be able to get a shot into the Pershing, but he's crossed. So Pershing's crossed. He's over here as well. I see him coming, and I'm going to come around the corner, and we're going to kill him. No. Not only are we going to not kill him, we're going to take a hit from him. Try to get away. We're going to take a track from the Tiger II, and now we want to cover up because I'm worried about the KV2. And now it's just me and these two smaller tanks taking on a KV2 and two of their tier 8s. And again, I'm going to get a little over aggressive here because I'm thinking, well, I can kill this Pershing. I'll just come up, we'll kill the Pershing, and we'll move on to the... Oh, nope, we're going to get tracked. And then the Pershing does something really unbelievable. He comes out around the corner one more time. Now, I sort of figured he was not that good based on what he'd done before, and was kind of hoping for that to happen, but to be quite honest, he shouldn't have done that, and I should have been in a lot more trouble. They finally kill a Su-100. So really, if these three had done it right, the Tiger II would have just come around the corner, ignored the Su-100, followed up by the KV2. The Pershing would have waited, and they'd have jumped all over me and crushed me, with maybe some shots of opportunity on the 100. So I really put myself in a bad position, assuming that I was going to bully like crazy. And that can be done with this tank, but I'm showing you this replay because you've got to be careful being alone. I basically was. The Su-100 was helping a little bit, but I was fighting two of their 8s and one of their very good tier 6s, and it didn't go very well. As you can see, I've got a whole 621 spotting and 197 damage. And so let's watch what happens here, because I'm able to take him down. Tiger punishes me. I didn't put an angle on it. And the Tiger basically reloads pretty much twice for every shot I have. Not quite, but pretty much. So even though he just fired and I was already reloading, look how long it's going to take me. And I'm ungainly. I've got to do this whole turnaround thing. And all of a sudden now, now I've got a T-25 sitting in the bush right there. He takes another shot. This time he pens me. Switching to gold, or actually he was firing gold the whole time, so I need to cover up. And I'm thinking, man, 656 damage and 685 assists just isn't very good. But the good news is the P-43 comes around behind that guy, and then the T-25 gets lit because he fires at him, and that allows me to then start breaking this open. I'll punish the T-25, and of course we're winning by miles, right? And interesting, not due to a whole lot to what I'm doing, other than the fact that I kept their 2-8s pretty busy. This one for sure, and to some extent the Pershing later on after he moved. The Tiger just turns around trying to get the P-43. He dies, and we're going to end up winning this. But me with a whole measly 1582 and 967 assists. It's just a cautionary tale for you when you're any tank like this that's relatively slow. When you get, and it's slow and armored, you get it in a top tier, and you look at the enemy lineup and go, man, I can bully. Make sure you've got the conditions to bully, because I really didn't. To a large extent, I was very lucky that their team wasn't very good. I should have been swarmed and taken out pretty quickly right there. So let's move on to the third example. All right, for the last one, it is my first ace game in this. Again, top tier and a bit of a nail biter at the end. Very close game across the board. Moving across this, I knew I was going to be hit. I was actually doing this on stream, and I said, my biggest worry here is one of these faster mediums coming across and either shooting the heck out of me on the side or artillery doing that. And thank goodness it didn't actually track me and force me to use one of my kits, because I get hit again by the Hummel for 279. And that's just something you're going to deal with this tank on certain maps where the heavy area, if that's where you're going to go, is exposed in crossing positions like that, you will suffer some hits. Even the KV2 is out in front of me right there. So I had a kind of the similar mindset to the one where it was a much closer game, but this time I said, all right, I can bully, but I need to make sure I've got the conditions set, and I have a lot of friends with me. So this was very good. I'm looking at this going, all right, this is going to work out. An IS-6 I'm not really that afraid of. The Scorpion can hurt me. I would like to avoid getting machine gunned by the Black Prince if they can get around me. And really, if they press 2, they're going to have no trouble going through my lower plate or through my side. So there's plenty of dangerous things here. See that guy just shoot on the way across. 30-45 taking shots. And then, of course, the last thing, dealing with the artillery. So I'm going to do a little bit of a no respect thing here, and initially it works out pretty well. You can see I've got several heavies stacked up there. None of them have great pens, so I'm going to come around here and see if I can't put a little shot into this guy. So we'll just be careful, and we'll drop that 400 or 567. So look at that high roll. That was a fantastic high roll on a 490 gun to start off the game at 567. The IS is getting a little bit pushed in here, so I really want to start working these guys over. I'm able to drop 447, a little bit of a low roll into the IS-6, and I'm going to take this opportunity to move up because I'd really like to try to keep this IS alive. And I feel like if I can get really close in here with this IS-6, I can start absolutely bullying him. But unfortunately, and that's a bummer, this guy finds a way up on the hill, and all of a sudden now we're flanked by a Type 59 who's more or less hold down there, and I'm going to have a really hard time with the accuracy of my gun getting in on him. And he's just absolutely wrecking all of our heavies in the side who don't have any shots. So I'll ignore him and come around this side, looking for a shot into him. We'll put one there, and he's down to 105. And I'm thinking, all right, next shot, he's dead. I should have pressed 2 just to make sure he goes away because I have a little bit of trouble with this guy. The T-34-3 goes around the corner, gets hit. Notice the 2 Black Princes are still alive. So I'm thinking, all right, instead of going with the Black Prince, I'll just finish this guy. I think I hit his gun. Hit his gun or just hit that nice slanted side armor, and all of a sudden he makes a nice bold move, and I'm thinking, oh crud, now I got to turn around. I had hoped that the T-34-3 would take him down, and finally he goes down. So that cost us a little time, and now the 2 Black Princes, who should have been pushing in to begin with. I'll just come around here. Big mistake. So what I did there is I hit that big front sprocket, which is not a hitbox area. I did track him, so they're just taking shots. 2 of them go down, and now we're in really good shape, except that there's guys behind us as well. So we'll go over here and look for the side of his turret. There we go. I don't know why he backs up. He actually had better armor profile to me by face hugging, but I was able to back up enough to get him. Now that Type 59, and now he's trouble. Look how even it is, though. It's actually pretty good. We got a lot of campers back there, TDs and the T20 hanging out back there. They'll play a part here in a minute. The KV2 is trying to help us figure out how to get rid of this guy. And oh, a ricochet. That was an absolute killer right there. Very frustrating. Must have got into his turret. Nice rounded turret. Was able to bounce it. A little bit of a look up too. So now it looks like he is engaging the T-62. And I really figured we had him now. Just waiting for that shot. There you go, fully zoomed. He's right down to a 184. All right, this is doped. We got this guy. And here's where that long reload is going to kill us, because I just cannot get reloaded in time to get around the corner and kill it. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how did that guy get away? 184, a full, what was it, fully hit point? A full hit point type, or very close to it. But down he goes. I don't know if he got hit by artillery or what, but killed off by the type. So really we got to deal with this guy somehow before I can get out of here. Even if I cross, I'll probably take a shot in the side. Plus I will then expose myself to artillery. So I can either tuck up underneath the carrier, which I don't want to do, or go across that way, which exposes me to Artie and potentially. And then I see the Scorpion G, and I'm thinking, all right, we got this doped. Now we're going to kill this guy. I'll just shoot him right here. Nope, I'm unable to do so. Back up out of here. And I think, all right, Scorp's got him. He'll come around and kill him off, right? There we go. Looking good. Now it's 8-7. Okay, so I took the heavily armored, unfortunately, the KV2 gets nuked by their Scorpion, who's, I don't know why he would have poked around the corner with a Scorpion sitting up on their cap. That is unfortunate. I think I actually get spotted right here, as I recall. Does that happen? No, actually I get by there. All right, so I went to the heavy brawling area, air quotes, and I took the right tank to the right place, and I'm able to help win that brawl. Although that move by the type cost us a lot more. Cost us a lot more than I would have liked, and it's a much more even game. And now I'm forced to do some maneuver fight with my big, fat, slow, heavy. What's interesting here is I think it's the IKV that moves. Yeah, it's IKV that moves across, and he does a pretty good job keeping them busy. And all of a sudden, I think the Scorpion comes off of the top, and I'm having a little bit of trouble deciding what to do. And then I say, "Oh shoot, there's the 44-100." And it was about the time I came around the corner I realized that the 44-100 I don't think had been seen, which meant it probably had its full hit points, and that's kind of trouble right now. The Scorpion's trying to take shots at them. Looks like they see each other at this point. And now I've got to get in here and support the Scorpion. I'm hoping, yeah, that's what I wanted to have happen. I wanted that 44 to go on the other side of that rock so he didn't know that I was there. And then the Scorpion, for whatever reason, is way up high. I think he's looking for shots, but he's exposed to their artillery, and I think he dies here pretty quick, which is not good at all. So the T-44, I'm just looking for him. Here he comes, so we'll put a shot on him. He tucks over that way, which was good, and then gets hammered by the artillery, which is also good. But he gets a chunk of the Scorpion. Scorpion's running for his life, and I'm looking for that reload, thinking, please, please reload. Do not arty or ammo rack me. Do not bounce, and it all works out for us in the end. But we lose the Scorpion. Nope, not yet. Sorry, we're going to lose the Scorpion in a minute. That's what I started talking about earlier. I thought that was it there. Don't go off that fast. That was a bit dangerous. And I swing back around this way. So I had two options. Push their cap or swing around this way. Turns out actually pushing their cap was a good idea. I think the IKV actually got them turned around. Because what happens here is the Scorpion is actually able to tuck up under their cap, which surprised me a bit. I fully expected, once I saw him going that way, I said, oh, you muppet. I fully expected him just to die as he crossed. But the fact is he actually gets there. And that's a little bit frustrating because had I gone with him, we'd have been right up underneath him. So there's the Scorpion. The IKV gets killed. The Scorpion gets killed by our Scorpion. Very good, but now he's stuck behind that rock over there and more than likely going to get splashed to death or killed. Looks like he's actually trying to make a move forward. So I'm going to try to use him as a spotter, and just look how long it takes. It's one of the problems with big, heavy tanks, big, slow, heavy tanks in this game. I'm going to take a bit of a chance. I'm just sort of hoping that the Scorpion will get a light for me. And then I think better of it. And I think, all right, Tearjerker, just hang out there for a second. We have 6 minutes. Just let me get around this corner over here, and all will be fine and dandy. Just stay unlit. The problem is they know he's there. So more than likely, their IKV or the T-25-2 are looking for an opportunity to go track down this Scorpion, probably thinking that he's isolated. Now, I wasn't spotted for a while, so that may be keeping them from going there. And then all of a sudden I get spotted, but that's okay, because it's actually the T-25 out in the open. I see him do that. Sorry, not quite out in the open, but out in the open to our artillery, who takes a chunk out of him and brings him down to a one-shot, and then I eat 251 from the Hummel. So I'll use my kit. I'm looking to protect myself. The IKV kills our Hummel. Not good. We're down to 4 tanks. And the T-25 is up in behind those buildings, and I know that he probably can't see me, so I'm just going to cross right here and try to protect myself a little bit more from Artie. I'm going to have a hard time dueling it. Unfortunately, their Hummel kills our Scorp, and all of a sudden what was looking good is looking not quite as good. But their IKV is up on our cap, and the T-25 is right here in front of me somewhere. So I'm really hoping the artillery can help deal with the IKV, and I can find this guy doing something silly like this. Take him down, we'll back out, and I'll keep moving. And down goes the IKV 65-2. This was probably not a great idea, driving up and into these buildings. My thought here was potentially the artillery, the one Hummel that's left, was shooting probably over where the IKV was, because he was engaging those two Artie. And I'm just assuming that right now he's not reloaded, and that's a good thing. I don't think I can be one shot by him, possibly. I was also a little bit curious whether I could even get up this embankment, but it turns out I can. Not very quickly. We got 4 minutes and 30 seconds, so I'm really just headed to cap. Come up to this bush. Hopefully we see him, which we do not. The 13 F3 is doing a good thing. He's moving up and being a little bit supportive, looking to maybe get some lights in case the guy's running in some direction. Maybe he can get the guy to fire. Excuse me. We find him right there. Take him down for the 4th kill. 3,854 damage, 311 assist. Ends up being an ace tanker. Top tier, but a good example of its capability in its element in the heavy brawl, and then a bit of its limitations while it's attempting to flex around, especially late game and cleanup operations. The big, heavy, slow armor tank can be very difficult to use. All right, let's wrap this thing up for the VK 7501K. All right, that is it on the 7501K Tier 8 German heavy premium tank. It's a great value. It really is. Is it the next OP tank? Is it the next carry tank? No, not really. Is it the next the follow-on to the Object 252U must-have heavy tank? Nope. But if you like German tanks, if you like heavy tanks, if you like good armor profiles, at least from the front, and you're kind of interested in that big stick of a 490 Alpha to see how that works out in World of Tanks, then this may be the tank for you. It's a solid tank. It's a good deal. Again, I generally don't talk about price because that's really up to you guys, whether you can afford it or want it. But it's noteworthy because compared to other Tier 8s, it's quite a bit cheaper. So I really actually kind of enjoyed this tank. You know, the slow gameplay style is not really my thing, but this one was pretty good at it. All right, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. As always, if you like what you saw, subscribe, leave a comment below, and we will see you.